Introduction. The year was 2341. Humanity had long since made its mark on the galaxy, spreading across distant stars, forming alliances and proving itself as a formidable presence among the interstellar community. Earth, the cradle of civilization, had become a revered relic, a center of politics, history, and culture, though few still called it home. The planet stood as a symbol, a heart still beating at the center of the Terran Dominion. For centuries, Earth had been the beacon of communication, its orbital relays pulsing with signals that connected the vast network of human colonies and diplomatic stations. The Sol system was a fortified haven, its defense grid unmatched, its skies patrolled by the most advanced warships in human history. No one, not even the most aggressive alien factions, dared to challenge its sovereignty. Then, on the eve of the galactic convergence, it happened. Earth went silent. At first, the silence was subtle, a momentary gap in transmissions that could be attributed to interference. But then the minutes stretched into hours, and hours into a full day. Every transmission, every distress call, every automated signal from Earth ceased. Not a whisper of communication escaped the planet's surface. It was impossible. Earth's backup relays, designed to survive cataclysms, refused to respond. Deep space observation platforms detected no unusual energy readings, no signs of attack, no explosions, no anomalies. The planet simply stopped. When the Terran High Council, operating from Mars, realized the gravity of the situation, they dispatched the Seventh Fleet, humanity's finest warships, to investigate. Billions across the Dominion held their breath, watching the live broadcast of the fleet's approach. The galaxy, too, waited in silent dread. As the fleet emerged from its final warp, piercing the dark expanse of space beyond Luna, they saw Earth. It was there, whole and unchanged. The oceans shimmered beneath the sunlight. The continents stretched vast and serene. But something was wrong. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The orbital stations that once bustled with activity were lifeless. No ships moved in and out. No signals blinked from the surface. The entire planet was frozen in eerie stillness. Then came the first transmission from the fleet's flagship, the TDS Aegis. It was the last thing the galaxy heard before all hell broke loose. "This is Admiral Victor Resner of the Terran Dominion. We have entered high orbit above Earth. We see the planet intact." But a long pause. A sound like static but deeper, almost organic. "By the stars, what is this? What have they done to you?" The transmission cut. Silence. Total, unbreakable silence. The Terran Dominion was shattered. The alien factions, some allies, some rivals, some sworn enemies, felt a chill creep into their bones. Something had taken Earth, and the most powerful military force in human history had simply vanished. Across the galaxy, a single, terrifying question echoed in the minds of trillions. If Earth can fall without a sound, what hope is there for the rest of us? Chapter 1. The Ghost Fleet. The disappearance of the Seventh Fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Terran Dominion, once the unshakable force of order and power, found itself staring into an abyss of uncertainty. Across human colonies and outposts, paranoia took root. Civilian transports avoided the Sol system entirely, and interstellar markets plummeted as panic gripped entire sectors. The Dominion's remaining high command, now operating from Luna Base, assembled in a state of controlled hysteria. Generals, admirals, and political leaders shouted over each other, scrambling for explanations. Was it an attack? A new alien weapon? A natural disaster? Do we retaliate? Grand Strategos Alina Kovac, the highest-ranking officer of the Dominion's Navy, stood at the center of the war room, her voice cutting through the noise. Enough! The chamber fell silent, dozens of officials turning their eyes toward her. We do not move forward with speculation. We gather intelligence. We send another expedition. The protest was immediate. We just lost our best fleet, one admiral barked. We don't even know what happened to them, which is precisely why we need answers, Kovac snapped. We will deploy a scout force, small, fast, and focus on reconnaissance. We find out what happened before we send another fleet to its doom. Her words held weight. A decision was made. A single stealth-class vessel, the TDS Revenant, was selected. Crew capacity, 12 souls. Mission, enter Sol System. Approach Earth. Retrieve intelligence. Return alive. The commander chosen for the suicide mission was Captain Elias Voss, a man with a reputation for surviving the impossible. He did not hesitate when given the order. 3 days later, the Revenant entered warp, streaking through the void toward the silent planet. The ship exited warp at the edge of the Sol System, drifting into the black expanse beyond Neptune. The crew, seasoned operatives all, sat in tense silence as Earth came into view on their tactical displays. The planet remained unchanged, beautiful, whole, and lifeless. Voss inhaled deeply. Initiate silent running. No emissions. No signals. We go in dark. The pilot, Lieutenant Sienna Orloff, nodded, engaging the stealth protocols. The Revenant became a whisper in space, gliding toward the homeworld that no longer spoke. As they approached, the void became eerie, too still. The usual cosmic radiation, the ambient hum of deep space, the faint signals of human satellites, all gone. The instruments picked up nothing. This isn't normal, muttered Ensign Raoul Jean, the ship's sensor specialist. Even a dead world has background noise. This is like... The comms crackled. Not a transmission. A sound. A whisper. It was not human. Cut the feed. Voss ordered instantly. Jin's hands flew over the controls, silencing the speakers. His face was pale. That wasn't interference, sir. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Something just tried to speak to us. Voss felt an ice-cold weight settle in his gut. Stay on course. We reach high orbit in 10 minutes. The ship pressed on. Then they saw them. The remains of the Seventh Fleet. The Aegis, the pride of the Dominion Navy, floated in darkness, its hull split open as if torn by unseen hands. Surrounding it were dozens of other warships, their forms eerily intact yet lifeless. There were no distress beacons, no emergency signals, no signs of battle. It was as if the ships had been drained, or hollowed out. Orloff swallowed hard. No bodies. Jin's voice trembled. Sir, where the hell is the crew? Voss exhaled, forcing himself to stay focused. Scan the ships. See if anything's still operational. The scans came back within seconds. Every ship in the fleet was broadcasting the same message over and over, a repeating distress signal, but not in any known human language. Jin's hands shook as he enhanced the audio. The alien whisper they had heard before, it was the message, the same words, over and over. And then one of the ships moved. No engines, no visible propulsion, just the slow, unnatural drift toward the Revenant. Orloff's breath caught in her throat. Voss, something is inside those ships. The bridge went dead silent. Then the whisper returned. This time, it spoke inside the ship. The lights flickered, and every screen displayed the same word. Run. Voss did not hesitate. Full burn. Get us out of here. Now. The Revenant lurched forward, engines roaring as it turned to escape. Behind them, the dead fleet began to stir. The Aegis, its once magnificent hull now an empty husk, twisted in space, something inside its hollow shell shifting. And then, in the vastness of the silent void, the crew of the Revenant heard it, a single voice, not a whisper, but a scream. It came from Earth, and the galaxy trembled. Chapter 2. The Scream That Shook the Stars. The Revenant tore through space at impossible speed, its engines burning hotter than ever before. The crew barely had time to process what they had heard, what they had felt. The scream from Earth hadn't been a normal sound. It had resonated in their bones, rattled the air in their lungs. It was like the wail of a dying god, reverberating through the very fabric of space. "Talk to me," Captain Elias Voss barked, gripping the side of his command chair as the ship trembled from the sudden acceleration. Jean, still pale and visibly shaken, struggled to stabilize the sensor feeds. "Sir, that wasn't just a scream. He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the edge of his console. "It came through subspace." Voss stiffened. "Explain." Jean swallowed hard. It wasn't a sound wave traveling through space. It was something deeper. It hit us through every channel. Communications, sensors, even our neural implants. Whatever made that sound, it wasn't just on Earth. It was reaching out. Lieutenant Orloff, still gripping the controls, cursed under her breath. Whatever it wasn't just for us. That thing. She gestured toward the black void beyond the viewport, toward the distant, unmoving world of Earth. It wanted the whole galaxy to hear. A pit of dread settled in Voss's stomach. "Are we still being pursued?" he asked, his voice tight. Jean checked the tactical scans. "The fleet isn't following. They have stopped moving." "Stopped." Voss frowned. "Just like that." "It's like something put them back to sleep," Jean muttered. "They started drifting again, like before." Voss didn't like this. Not one bit. It felt too deliberate. "What about the system? Any new readings?" Jean hesitated. Then his fingers tightened on the console. "Sir, I think something just woke up on Mars. Luna Base, Terran High Command." The first to feel the aftershock of Earth's scream were the psionics. Humans with the rare ability to tap into the unseen layers of the universe. Their talents had long been studied, regulated, and feared, but never before had they experienced anything like this. In an instant, every psionic across the Terran dominion collapsed. Some fell into seizures, others into catatonic silence. On Luna Base, Elias Wren, the highest-ranking psionic in the Dominion, stood frozen in the war room, his eyes unfocused, his breath short and panicked. His colleagues surrounded him, calling his name. But Wren was elsewhere. He was seeing it. Something beneath Earth. Something inside Mars. And beyond, a presence older than human existence itself, stirring in the dark corners of the galaxy. His lips trembled as he finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "It knows we're here." Then he collapsed. Alarms screamed through the base. Something was moving on Mars. The red planet awakens. The Revenant hurtled toward the outer system, but Voss had to make a choice. The ship had picked up anomalous readings from Mars, and Luna Base was calling. "What the hell is going on?" Voss demanded over the encrypted channel. A voice crackled back, a frantic officer from Luna Base. "Sir, something just started transmitting from Mars." Voss's blood ran cold. From where? Olympus Mons, came the answer. But, sir, that's impossible. We abandoned the Mars colonies 20 years ago. There's nothing left down there. Or so they had believed. The transmission was not human. It was old. Very, very old. And it spoke in 3 languages. One ancient Terran, one unknown, and one that had not been used for over 300,000 years. The last time that language had been spoken, the speakers of it had vanished from the galaxy, extinct, or so the galaxy had thought. The Revenant changed course. They were going to Mars, and whatever was waiting for them there, it had been waiting a very long time. Chapter 3. The Graves Beneath Mars. The Revenant descended toward Olympus Mons, Mars' towering, ancient volcano. Once the crown jewel of the Terran frontier, the planet had been abandoned 2 decades prior after a catastrophic terraforming failure. The Martian colonies were deemed unsustainable, and the Dominion had withdrawn, leaving behind only lifeless ruins. But now, something was alive down there. The transmission, the one speaking in a dead language, continued to pulse from beneath the surface, and it was growing stronger. Captain Elias Voss sat rigid in his command chair as his crew prepped for landing. "Status," he asked, keeping his tone steady. Lieutenant Orlov, her hands tight on the flight controls, exhaled sharply. "Descent path locked. Gravity stabilization holding. Mars is quiet. Too quiet," muttered Ensign Raoul Jean, still monitoring the anomalous signals. "Atmospheric readings are flat. No dust storms, no ionization. It's like the planet is holding its breath." Voss didn't like it. "Bring us down." Land near the Olympus Mons excavation site. The Revenant descended into the thin Martian sky, thrusters kicking up clouds of red dust as it touched down near the base of the towering volcano. As soon as they landed, the ship's sensors shut off. All of them. Orlov swore. "What the hell? I just lost all telemetry." Jin's voice was tight with panic. "Sir, something is jamming us." "And wait, the transmission. It's changing." The alien signal had stopped repeating. Now it was reacting. Something knew they were here. Voss unstrapped himself. "Suit up. We're going outside. Martian ruins." The ground team, Voss, Orlov, Jean, and 3 security officers, stepped into the crimson dust, their boots sinking slightly into the dry, cracked surface. The ruins of the Olympus Mons excavation site stretched before them. Twisted metal, abandoned research stations, and shattered domes half buried in the sand. Voss activated his helmet's visor scanner. No life signs. No movement. And yet, something watched them. Jin's voice crackled in the comms. "The signal is coming from beneath us. There's an underground chamber. We need to find an entrance." They moved cautiously through the ruins until they found it. An old research elevator, rusted but intact, leading into the depths below. The Dominion had sealed it off before leaving Mars. Now, something had reopened it. Orlov hesitated. "Sir, I have a very bad feeling about this." Voss did too, but they had come too far to turn back now. "We're going in." The team entered the elevator. The doors groaned closed. And then, as the platform began to descend, the lights flickered out. The vault of the lost. The elevator shuddered to a stop deep underground, its emergency lights barely illuminating the cavern ahead. The air was thick with something ancient, something wrong. Jin's voice trembled. "Sir, I think this place is older than humanity." Voss stepped forward, his rifle raised. The walls of the cavern were not natural. They were smooth, carved with symbols that defied translation. The floor was lined with rows of structures, not buildings. Tombs. Orloff exhaled sharply. This isn't just an excavation site. She turned to Voss, her face pale through her visor. This is a graveyard. Jin's scanner beeped erratically. The signal is coming from up ahead. They advanced cautiously through the tombs. The air grew heavier with every step, as if something unseen was pressing down on them. Then they reached the center of the chamber, and they saw it, a monolithic structure, rising from the ground like an obsidian obelisk. Its surface was shifting, its patterns moving, as if the stone itself was alive. Jin's scanner shorted out. What the hell? Then the whispers returned, but this time they didn't come through the comms. They were inside their minds. Who disturbs the sleepers? Orloff gasped. Sir, that wasn't a transmission. That was in my head. Jean was shaking. This place, it's not just a tomb. It's a containment field. Something was locked in here. Voss' throat was dry. Then why is it still speaking? Silence. Then a deep, guttural sound rumbled through the chamber. Not from the obelisk, from beneath it. The dust at their feet shifted. The ground shook. And then, from the tombs around them, shadows began to rise. The long-dead inhabitants of Mars were waking up, and they were not human. Chapter 4. The Forgotten Ones. The first movement was subtle, a flicker of shifting dust, a faint tremor in the air. Then came the unmistakable sound of stone grinding against stone, as if the very planet was stirring. Voss barely had time to react before the tombs cracked open. Shapes lurched from the darkness. They were tall, impossibly thin. Their elongated forms draped in what looked like ceremonial armor fused to their bodies. Their skull-like faces were etched with alien symbols that glowed faintly, and in their empty eye sockets, a dim blue fire flickered to life. They moved slowly at first, as if shaking off the weight of centuries. Then, all at once, they turned their heads toward the intruders, and the whispers in Voss' mind became screams. Fall back! Voss' shout barely registered over the shrill pulse in his skull. He yanked Orloff backward as the nearest creature twitched, its skeletal hand flexing unnaturally. The second it moved, reality itself seemed to bend, the air rippled, and suddenly it was closer. Too close. Open fire. The cavern erupted in gunfire. Pulse rifles flashed, bright blue bolts streaking toward the creatures. The first few rounds hit their targets, sending shards of blackened bone flying. But then the air hummed. The creatures shifted again, one moment staggering from the impact, the next standing completely still, as if the shots had never landed at all. What the hell? Jin's voice was high with panic. They're phasing. They're not. A hand shot forward, long, spindly, and inhumanly fast. One of the security officers, Carter, didn't even have time to scream. The moment the thing touched him, his body froze mid-motion, locked in place by an invisible force. His eyes went wide, and then his body simply disintegrated, breaking apart into glowing dust that drifted toward the obelisk like embers in the wind. Run! The squad turned and sprinted for the elevator. The creatures did not chase them. They simply watched. The whispers changed. They were laughing. The descent into madness. The team reached the elevator, slamming the controls. Nothing. Orloff punched the panel. It's not working. Jin's hands trembled as he checked his scanner. I think they're doing something to it. We're trapped. Voss' mind raced. There had to be another way out. Then the whispers stopped, and something else began speaking. Not an alien voice. A human one. Voss! The crew froze. Jean paled. No, no, that's not possible, because the voice that had just spoken, hoarse, broken, and impossibly distant, was Admiral Victor Resner, the same man who had been aboard the TDS Aegis, the same man who had vanished with the Seventh Fleet, the same man who should be dead. Voss! The voice came again, weak, rasping, but undeniably real. You have to stop them before it's too late, before they... A sharp, wet gasp. Then, it's already awake. Silence. Then the elevator roared to life. The door slammed shut. The cabin lurched upward. The team barely had time to react before they were racing toward the surface, the distant cavern shrinking below. Orlov was breathing hard. Sir, what the hell just happened? Jean was shaking his head violently. That was Resner. That was him. But he's... Voss didn't answer. His mind was still reeling. If Resner was still alive, then what had happened to the rest of the fleet? And what the hell had he meant by "it's already awake"? The elevator slammed to a stop. The doors hissed open. The team stumbled out onto the Martian surface, gasping for air, hearts pounding. And then they looked up. Their ship, the Revenant, was still there, still intact, but its exterior was covered in writing, the same glowing symbols they had seen in the tombs. Something had touched the ship while they were gone, and the moment Voss saw it, he knew. They were already too late. Whatever had been buried beneath Mars was no longer buried. Chapter 5. The Price of Awakening. The Martian air was thin, the silence so absolute that it pressed against their ears. The Revenant loomed before them, its once pristine hull now defiled, etched with the same shifting, alien symbols they had seen in the tombs below. The writing glowed faintly, as if something had scrawled it not just into the metal, but into the very essence of the ship. Voss got twisted with a realization he didn't want to accept. They had been marked. Orlov, scan the ship, he ordered, keeping his voice steady despite the storm of dread inside him. She hesitated, then tapped at her wrist console. Her visor display flickered as it processed the data, before suddenly glitching out. She swore. Scanners are dead. The ship systems, hell, our entire interface. It's been compromised. Jean moved closer, his voice tight with panic. Sir, what if it's not just a ship? What if it's us? Voss didn't respond. He didn't have to, because at that moment, his neural implant, normally silent unless activated, whispered directly into his mind. A voice, ancient, hungry. You hear us now. Voss jerked backward, his hands flying to his temples. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. It was inside him, not just his mind, not just his thoughts. It was deeper, weaving through his memories, his fears, his very identity. The others staggered. Jean let out a strangled gasp. Orlov dropped to one knee, shaking violently. They were all hearing it. You will return to the stars. You will carry our voice, and they will know what has been done. The stowaway. The whispers stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The team was left gasping, their bodies trembling as if they had just surfaced from drowning in ice. Voss was the first to regain control. He turned toward the ship, jaw clenched. We're leaving. Now. No one argued. The Revenant's airlock hissed as it opened, the ship eerily silent as they stepped inside. The familiar interior should have been a relief, a sanctuary from the madness outside. But instead, it felt wrong, colder, as if something else had walked in with them. Jean checked the control panel. Main systems are online, but there's residual energy everywhere. That writing? It's not just carved into the hull. It's in the code, sir. Voss frowned. You're saying the ship is infected? Jean swallowed hard. I'm saying I don't know what the hell we just brought on board. Orloff exhaled sharply. If we stay here any longer, we'll find out the hard way. She was right. They had to move. Voss slid into the captain's chair and strapped in. Set course for Luna Base. Full burn. Orloff engaged the thrusters. The ship shuddered before lifting off the red surface, streaking into the cold abyss of space. As Mars shrank below them, Voss glanced at the comms panel. The transmission, the one from below Olympus Mons, was still broadcasting. But now, it was no longer speaking in 3 languages. Now, it spoke in hundreds, a chorus of voices overlapping, whispering in tongues both ancient and new. It was spreading, and they were carrying it with them. Luna Base, the coming storm. By the time the Revenant dropped out of warp near Luna Base, the Dominion was already in chaos. Every psionic on the station had either collapsed or fallen into a deep, unresponsive state. The scream from Earth had left many of them permanently damaged, their minds fractured by something they could not describe. But what happened next was worse. When the Revenant hailed the base, a response came almost instantly. But it was not from command. It was from Elias Wren, the most powerful psionic in the Dominion. The man who had collapsed after uttering those chilling words. It knows we're here. Now! His voice was clear, strong, and wrong. Captain Voss, he said, his tone eerily smooth. We've been waiting for you. Voss' fingers hovered over the comm switch. Wren, what's going on? A pause. Then, come aboard. And for the first time, Voss felt it. Not just a presence. A link. Whatever had whispered into his mind on Mars. Whatever had touched him. It was already here. Waiting. Watching. And as the Revenant approached the station, Voss understood the truth. Luna Base had already fallen, and the Dominion had no idea. Chapter 6. The Hollow Dominion. The Revenant drifted toward Luna Base, its sleek hull reflecting the cold light of Sol. The station, once the beating heart of the Terran Dominion's military might, stood silent. Too silent. Voss had docked here dozens of times. There were always comms chatter, docking lights guiding ships in, orbital drones patrolling the exterior. But now, nothing moved. Something's wrong, Orloff whispered. Jin's fingers twitched over the sensor panel. We're not detecting life signs, but that doesn't make sense. There should be at least 50,000 personnel on board. 50,000 people. All unaccounted for. And Wren, Voss asked. Jean hesitated, then nodded. One signature. Deep inside the command spire. But, sir, it's fluctuating. Voss tightened his jaw. Wren was waiting, and so was whatever had taken him. The silent station. The airlock hissed as the team stepped onto the station. The moment their boots touched the deck, an unsettling stillness settled over them. The corridors of Luna Base, normally filled with the hum of machinery and the voices of thousands of crew members, were deserted. Orloff gripped her rifle. This feels like Earth. And she was right. The same emptiness. The same unnatural quiet. The Dominion's mightiest fortress had become a tomb. Jean swept the scanner across the corridor walls. The results made his breath catch. Sir, those symbols from Mars? They're here too. Voss turned sharply. The markings, those shifting, glowing wounds in reality, stretched across the bulkheads, twisting around doors and running through the very metal of the station like veins. This wasn't a military installation anymore. It was infected. And then the lights flickered. A voice echoed through the corridors. Not over the comms. Not from speakers. From everywhere. Come inside, Captain. We need to speak. We need you to understand. The throne of the dead. Voss led his team through the lifeless station, weapons raised. The deeper they went, the worse it became. The walls seemed to breathe, the symbols pulsing with an unseen heartbeat. The air grew heavy, filled with a distant churning sound, like something vast shifting just out of sight. Then they reached the command spire, and they found them, the missing crew, thousands of them, standing motionless, lined up in rows, their eyes vacant, their bodies stiff like mannequins. None reacted as the team stepped closer. None even breathed. Jin's voice was barely a whisper. They're still alive. Orloff swallowed hard. No, there's something else now. Then, as if hearing her, the rows of frozen people turned their heads at once. Not fast, not mechanical, just wrong. Captain Voss, Wren's voice echoed through the hall. Stepped forward. At the end of the corridor, seated on the High Command's throne, was Elias Wren, or what was left of him. His body was intact, but his face was shifting, his skin rippling like liquid, his eyes a void of swirling stars. The symbols from Mars etched across his skin, pulsing in time with the breathing walls. Voss gritted his teeth. What are you? Wren smiled. We are the first. We are the last. And we are returning. Voss fired. The shot hit Wren directly in the chest. For a split second he shuddered. Then his form snapped back, as if reality had merely bent and realigned. The wound vanished. The thing inside Wren sighed. Violence. The first response of all who refused to understand. Then the lights died, and everything moved at once. The thousands of hollowed crew lunged forward, their frozen limbs suddenly bursting into unnatural speed. The walls contracted, the floor twisted, the station itself coming alive, and Wren, or whatever had stolen his body, stood from the throne. Now, Captain, let me show you what waits beyond the veil. And Voss screamed. Final chapter. The veil is broken. The moment Wren rose from the throne, reality collapsed. Voss had faced death before. He had seen war, had stood on battlefields littered with the dead, had survived things no man should survive. But this was something older, deeper. This was the unraveling of everything he understood about existence. The fall of Luna Base. The corridor erupted into chaos. The hollowed crew surged forward, their movements jerky, like puppets pulled by unseen strings. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes void of humanity. Fall back! Voss roared. Orloff and Jean didn't hesitate. They fired into the oncoming horde, pulse rifles tearing through flesh. But the moment a body fell, it did not stay down. Instead, the air rippled, and the corpses stood back up, their wounds sealing as if time itself had rewound. Jean gasped. Sir, what the hell? Orloff didn't wait for an answer. Move! They turned and ran, weaving through the sea of frozen faces now stirring to life. Hands reached for them, mouths twitched, and the whispers were everywhere. Voss barely noticed when they burst into the docking bay. Barely noticed when Orloff hacked into the Revenant's airlock controls, forcing the ship to open. Barely noticed when Jean collapsed against the hull, panting, his eyes wide with terror, because Voss was still hearing it. Wren's voice. Inside his head. You are already beyond the veil, Captain. There is no escape. And then, from the darkness of the station, Ren stepped into the hangar bay. His form was still humanoid, still wearing the uniform of a Terran officer. But the thing inside him was no longer pretending. His eyes were black holes, his skin shifting like liquid shadow. The symbols burned brighter, warping the space around him. You do not understand what you've awoken. Voss lifted his weapon. His hands shook. Then tell me. Ren smiled, and the void answered. The truth of the first. A wave of darkness surged forward, engulfing the hangar. And in that instant Voss saw it. The truth. The galaxy had always believed humanity was alone in its origins. That Earth was a cradle of life, untouched by the ancient horrors that had once roamed the stars. They were wrong, because before humans, there had been another, a civilization so old it had no name, so vast it had no borders, so powerful it had touched the fabric of the universe itself. They had called themselves the first, and they had not disappeared. They had been sealed away, buried beneath Mars, locked inside Earth, hidden across the stars. By who? By something even worse, something that had feared them. And now the first were waking up, and they were hungry. The last flight of the Revenant. Voss staggered backward, his vision swimming. The images burned into his mind. They had to warn the Dominion. They had to run. He turned. Get U.S. off this station. Orloff was already in the pilot's chair, engaging thrusters. Jean slammed the airlock switch, sealing the hull. The Revenant roared to life, engines blazing as it pulled away from the docking bay. And behind them, Luna Base began to twist. The metal contorted. The corridors shrieked. The station itself moved like a living thing. The thousands of hollowed crew turned their empty eyes to the fleeing ship, and then, in one synchronized motion, they screamed, not in pain, in laughter, because they knew it was already too late. The first were no longer waiting. They were already here, and Earth was just a beginning. The galaxy trembles. The Revenant jumped to warp, streaking toward the Dominion's last stronghold in the Proxima system. Voss slumped in his chair, his hands trembling. Orloff's voice was hoarse. Sir, what do we do? Voss stared into the void ahead, and for the first time in his life, he had no answer, because Earth was gone, Luna Base was gone, and the whispers were still inside him, still waiting, still watching. The Terran Dominion had built an empire across the stars, and now the stars belonged to something else, something that had been forgotten, something that had been waiting in silence. And as the galaxy finally began to understand what had been unleashed, the whispers became a roar, and the darkness came crashing down, and